Welcome to the Middle Ages. Why you wouldn't survive a day. Hey everyone, welcome. Tonight, we're taking a deep dive into a world that most movies and books have glorified, but which was actually pretty brutal. The Middle Ages. Forget the romanticized castles, knights in shining armor, and grand feasts. The truth? You probably wouldn't last a single day in medieval Europe. And I'm not exaggerating. Imagine waking up not in a cozy bed with clean sheets, but on a rotting pile of straw mixed with hay and crawling with fleas, lice, and other bugs. Your blanket hasn't been washed since last winter and smells worse than you'd imagine, like the barn floor probably was a few months ago. That's your comfort. The church bell blares like an unforgiving alarm clock, signaling the start of your day in a tiny wooden hut with no windows, where you, your entire family, a few animals, and a host of pests all live crammed together. No privacy, no hygiene, no fresh air. Your room is shared by rodents and insects, and your only respite might be the occasional smell of manure wafting through the cracks. This is not a world for the faint-hearted. Why was life like this? Sanitation was almost non-existent. Waste disposal was primitive. People used chamber pots or just the nearest ditch, leading to disease spreading rapidly. Fleas and lice were constant companions, carriers of plagues that would periodically decimate entire regions. And the food? It was sparse, bland, and often spoiled. Breakfast, for example, wasn't eggs Benedict or avocado toast. It was usually a bowl of pottage, a thick, gloopy stew made from whatever roots, grains, or scraps you could find. Sometimes it was barely edible. Coffee, sugar, fresh fruits, those luxuries were centuries away from the common folk. And if you thought your clothes smelled bad today, imagine wearing layers of itchy wool stitched by someone who didn't know what seams were supposed to look like, and never washing them because soap was a rare and precious commodity. That means your clothes would be stiff, stained, and carrying the smell of the day you first put them on, possibly weeks or months ago. Let's talk about the bigger picture. This wasn't just a bad day situation. For most people, this was life every day, year after year, with little chance for escape or improvement. Disease, malnutrition, and hard labor were constants. Children often work alongside adults as soon as they could walk, with no schools, no toys, just survival. Women had an even heavier burden, caring for children, working the fields, cooking, cleaning, spinning wool, and deal with their own health issues without any support. Childbirth was incredibly dangerous and a leading cause of death for women. And mental health? It was invisible. There were no doctors to talk to about stress or anxiety. People suffered in silence, and often that silence was deadly. But here's the thing. All this grim reality teaches us something important. It forces us to appreciate the comforts we have today and reminds us of human resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship. It also challenges a Hollywood fantasy of the glorious Middle Ages, exposing the stark truth beneath the myths. Why do we romanticize the past? Maybe it's nostalgia or the appeal of stories about knights and queens, but understanding history as it really was brutal, dirty, and unforgiving helps us grasp the progress humanity has made. Plus, it humbles us. Imagine living in a time when something as simple as clean water or a warm, comfortable bed was a luxury. In upcoming sections, we'll explore real-life stories, dive deeper into medieval medicine, social dynamics, religion, and the unexpected lives of powerful women. We'll also look beyond Europe to ancient civilizations like the Maya and finish with a modern hero who defied physical and societal limitations, Frida Kahlo. So stick around. This journey through time isn't just about suffering. It's about survival, resilience, and the human spirit. Food, hygiene, and the brutal grind of daily medieval life. Let's dive deeper into what a typical day looked like in medieval Europe, especially focusing on the basics. Food, hygiene, and the endless grind of survival. First, the food. If you're imagining roasted chicken with potatoes and gravy, think again. The diet of the average medieval peasant was painfully simple, repetitive, and often insufficient. Most people ate what's called pottage, a watery, often tasteless stew made from grains like barley or oats, boil with whatever vegetables, roots, or occasionally scraps of meat they could scavenge. Archaeologists examining medieval cooking pots have found residue of nettles, wild onions, and sometimes bits of fish or bones, but rarely fresh meat. Meat was a luxury for peasants, usually reserved for religious festivals or special occasions. For most days, it was all about surviving on bulk carbs and some seasonal greens. This poor diet had consequences. Malnutrition was widespread, weakening people's immune systems. Dental decay was rampant. People's teeth would rot early because of a diet heavy in coarse grains and carbohydrates, but lacking fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, let's talk about hygiene or the shocking lack of it. Today, washing your hands before meals and bathing regularly is second nature. In medieval times, bathing was rare and often discouraged because people feared open pores of disease. Public bathhouses existed in some towns, but were often hubs of infection or even immoral behavior according to religious leaders. Imagine going days, even weeks, without a proper bath. Clothes weren't washed often either. Soap was mostly made from animal fats and ashes and was expensive. Without modern plumbing, people used simple wooden tubs or rivers for washing, often sharing water with animals. Add to that the close quarters living. Families sharing small huts with chickens, pigs, and sometimes cows, and you have a breeding ground for lice, fleas, and diseases like typhus and plague. There's a famous account from the Black Death period in the 14th century where people describe fleas jumping from rats onto humans, spreading the bubonic plague. Entire villages were wiped out because of these unsanitary conditions. And remember, this is just one example of the many deadly epidemics fueled by medieval living standards. Most medieval people worked from dawn to dusk, with barely enough time to eat or rest. Farming was backbreaking. They used basic tools like wooden plows pulled by oxen, no fertilizers, no mechanization. Women's work was just as hard. In many cases, women not only took care of the household, but also worked in the fields, spinning wool, making clothes by hand, cooking on open fires, all while pregnant or nursing children. Children started working at very young ages. There were no schools for peasants. Education was a privilege reserved for nobility or clergy. Instead, children learned trades or farming skills by watching and helping their parents. Play was minimal and often interrupted by the demands of survival. It's easy to take for granted how much our modern conveniences, electricity, running water, heating, refrigeration, have transformed everyday life, but also consider the psychological toll of such relentless hardship. Imagine never having a day off or feeling truly clean or safe. What strikes me is how humans adapted and endured such relentless challenges. The ingenuity of medieval people to survive using the limited resources they had is impressive, but it also shows how fragile life was. When I reflect on how many generations endured this, it really makes me appreciate modern medicine, sanitation, and even something as simple as a clean kitchen. At the same time, it's humbling to realize that many parts of the world today still face conditions that aren't far removed from medieval hardships. Lack of clean water, food insecurity, and poor sanitation. History isn't just the past. It's a mirror reflecting ongoing human struggles. Medieval medicine, social hierarchy, and the plight of women and children as we continue our journey through medieval life. It's impossible to ignore the crushing weight of medical ignorance and rigid social structures that shape daily existence. Life expectancy was low not just because of hunger and hard labor, but because medicine was often more superstition than science, and social status could mean the difference between life and death. Underscore, 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 underscore. Medieval medicine, more prayer than healing. Medicine in medieval Europe was a strange blend of ancient texts, superstition, and desperate trial and error. The dominant medical theory was based on the humoral system, the idea that the body contained four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, and that health meant balancing these fluids. If you were sick, doctors might bleed you, induce vomiting, or apply leeches to rebalance your humors. This sounds primitive, but it was the best they had. Hospitals existed, but they were more like places to care for the dying or the poor than centers for curing illness. Surgery was rare and horrifyingly painful. No anesthesia, no antiseptics. A broken bone or an infected wound often meant death or permanent disability. One famous medieval surgeon, Guy de Chauliac, wrote extensively about his attempts to treat plague victims during the Black Death. Despite his efforts, he documented how little could be done, noting that even skilled physicians were powerless against a rapid spread and devastation. This medical gap meant that injuries and diseases that are treatable today were often death sentences back then. Childbirth was particularly dangerous, with high mortality rates for both mother and child. Underscore, 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 underscore. The social ladder, born into your fate. Medieval society was rigidly hierarchical. From kings and nobles at the top down to serfs and peasants at the bottom, your social class determined almost everything. Your occupation, your rights, your chances of survival. Nobles enjoyed relative comfort, access to better food, clothing, and protection. Clergy held spiritual and sometimes political power. Peasants and serfs worked the land, often bound to the estates they lived on. The idea of social mobility was nearly non-existent. If you were born a serf, you likely lived and died a serf, paying heavy taxes or rents to your lord, and obliged to work his fields. This system might seem brutally unfair, but it was accepted as divinely ordained. Challenging social rank was often seen as challenging God's will. Underscore, 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 underscore. The plight of women and children. Women in medieval Europe faced enormous challenges. Legally and socially, they were subordinate to men with limited rights. Marriage was often about alliances and property rather than love or choice. Women worked hard both inside and outside the home, farming, brewing ale, spinning wool, cooking, cleaning, all while managing the household and children. Child mortality was staggeringly high. For every child born, there was a real chance they wouldn't survive past infancy. Diseases like measles, smallpox, and whooping cough were common killers. The chronicles of a medieval village woman, Agnes, describe how she lost 3 children before they reached age 5, and how she balanced grief with a relentless need to keep working to feed her family. Children themselves had few rights and little chance for formal education, especially among peasants. Their lives were shaped by the same harsh rhythms of survival as adults. Reflecting on medieval medicine and social structure, it's clear how much modern advances in healthcare and social justice have transformed human experience. The idea that your birth could seal your fate forever is hard to imagine today, yet it was an immutable reality for centuries. It's also sobering to consider how many lives were lost needlessly to ignorance and inequality. Yet, within this harsh framework, human resilience and community bonds often provided crucial support. Medieval justice, crime, and cultural beliefs. Medieval life wasn't just about surviving illness and poverty. It was also defined by a complex and often brutal system of justice, where laws, punishments, and superstitions intertwine to maintain order and control. Understanding this system gives us a window into the fears, values, and power dynamics of the time. Underscore 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 underscore. Justice in the Middle Ages, law and power. Medieval justice was a patchwork of local customs, royal decrees, and church law. The king's courts handled serious crimes, but local lords often had their own courts to judge peasants on their lands. This created a highly uneven legal system where your social status hugely influenced your chances in court. For nobles, trials were often formal and involved oaths, witnesses, and sometimes trial by combat. For peasants, justice was swift and harsh. Fines, public humiliation, or corporal punishment were common. The concept of innocent until proven guilty was practically non-existent. Accusations alone could lead to imprisonment or worse. Underscore 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 underscore. Crime and punishment. Harsh and public. Crime ranged from theft to murder to more minor offenses like breaking the Sabbath or failing to pay taxes. Punishments were deliberately harsh and public, serving as warnings to others. Stocks and pillories. Offenders were locked in public places to endure humiliation and sometimes physical abuse from passers-by. Whipping and branding. Physical punishment was common for theft or disobedience. Execution, reserved for the most serious crimes, such as murder or treason. Hanging was typical, but burning or beheading could occur depending on status and offense. Public executions were grim spectacles meant to reinforce authority and fear. Underscore 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 underscore. Trial by ordeal and divine judgment. One of the strangest aspects of medieval justice was the use of trial by ordeal, where the accused would undergo dangerous or painful tests believed to reveal divine truth. These can include holding a hot iron or walking on hot coals, being submerged in water to see if they floated or sank. If the person survived or healed quickly, they were deemed innocent by God's will. These trials highlight the deep interconnection between faith and law. Underscore 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 underscore. Cultural beliefs, superstition, and religion. Medieval culture was steeped in religion and superstition. People believed in angels, demons, witches, and miracles. These beliefs affected everyday decisions and justified harsh laws, especially against those accused of witchcraft or heresy. The church was a powerful force controlling education, morality, and even political affairs. The fear of damnation was a potent tool to enforce conformity and obedience. In 15th century Europe, thousands of women were accused of witchcraft and executed, often on flimsy evidence. These witch hunts reveal how fear and social tensions could lead to tragic injustices. The medieval justice system reflects a society struggling to balance order and fear. Punishments were not only about deterring crime, but about reinforcing a rigid hierarchy and social control. The blending of religious faith and legal authority created a world where truth was often a matter of interpretation and power rather than evidence. Reflecting on this, it's clear how much modern legal principles, such as rights to fair trial and protection against cruel punishment, represent profound advances in human rights. The power of religion in medieval life, learning, and art. Religion in the Middle Ages wasn't just a personal faith or weekly ritual. It was a lens through which people viewed the entire world. From birth to death, every aspect of medieval life was steeped in religious belief, shaping culture, education, and even artistic expression in profound ways. Underscore 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 underscore. Religion as the center of daily life. Medieval Europe was overwhelmingly Christian, with the Catholic Church acting as a spiritual and political superpower at the time. Churches were a social hub in every town and village, a place not just of worship, but of community gatherings, markets, and news. Daily life followed the rhythm of religious festivals, saints' days, and holy seasons like Lent and Advent. These occasions provided breaks from the hard labor of peasantry and reinforced communal identity. The Church's moral teachings shaped social behavior, from family roles to justice and charity, and failure to conform risked social exclusion, or even accusations of heresy. The Church's role in education and knowledge. Most education in the Middle Ages took place in monasteries and cathedral schools, where monks and priests preserved and copied manuscripts, taught Latin, and studied theology. This education was mostly limited to clergy and nobility. Universities, beginning in the 12th century, started to emerge as centers of learning, but even these were heavily religious institutions. The quest for knowledge was often framed as seeking God's truth. Thomas Aquinas, one of the most influential medieval thinkers, merged Christian theology with Aristotelian philosophy, laying foundations that still influence Western thought today. Art and architecture, expressions of faith. Religion inspired some of the most iconic medieval art and architecture. Gothic cathedrals with their soaring spires and stained glass windows weren't just buildings. They were symbolic expressions of divine glory designed to awe and uplift worshippers. Illuminated manuscripts, frescoes, and sculptures often depicted biblical stories to educate an illiterate populace, blending artistic skill with spiritual teaching. The dedication and resources poured into religious art reveal how central faith was to medieval identity. It also shows the Church's role as a major patron of the arts, shaping not only religious but cultural development. Religious conflicts and crusades. Religion was also a source of conflict. The Crusades, military campaigns sanctioned by the Church, were aimed at reclaiming the Holy Land but had wide-ranging consequences, including increased trade and cultural exchanges, as well as centuries of tension between Christians and Muslims. Internal conflicts, such as the rise of heresies, challenged church authority and sowed seeds of reform that would eventually reshape Europe. Religious Reflection on religion's role. The medieval church was a unifying force that provided meaning, order, and identity in a chaotic world. Yet, its power also led to control, suppression of dissent, and conflict. Understanding this dual role helps us appreciate how religion shaped the medieval mindset and societal structures in ways that still echo today. Commerce and change. How trade transformed medieval society. While castles and knights often dominate our imagination of the Middle Ages, the pulse of medieval life was increasingly shaped by commerce and trade. Economic developments during this period laid the groundwork for the modern world, and their impact rippled through every class and region. Religious The rise of markets and towns. As Europe gradually stabilized after centuries of conflict and fragmentation, new towns and cities began to flourish. These urban centers became hubs for merchants, craftsmen, and traders, signaling a shift from purely agrarian economies to more complex market systems. Markets, often held weekly in town squares, were where peasants sold surplus crops, artisans showcased their crafts, and merchants traded goods from distant lands. The growth of towns encouraged social mobility and a more diverse economy, slowly breaking down the rigid feudal hierarchy that had dominated rural life. Trade networks and long-distance commerce. Medieval Europe wasn't isolated. Trade routes crisscrossed the continent and extended into Asia and Africa, connecting Europe with the Silk Road, the Mediterranean, and even the emerging markets of the Indian Ocean. Luxury goods like spices, silk, and precious metals traveled thousands of miles, reaching wealthy nobles and clergy. At the same time, more everyday items like wool, salt, and iron circulated regionally. The Hanseatic League, a powerful alliance of merchant guilds and towns in northern Europe, controlled much of the Baltic and North Sea trade during the late Middle Ages, showcasing early forms of economic cooperation and regulation. Money, banking, and economic innovation. The increasing volume of trade led to innovations in money and finance. Coinage became more standardized, and banking practices, like letters of credit, began to appear, facilitating safer and larger-scale commercial transactions. These changes allowed merchants to accumulate wealth, invest in enterprises, and even challenge the economic dominance of the feudal aristocracy. The emergence of a merchant class hinted at the future rise of capitalism, highlighting how economic incentives can gradually reshape social and political structures. The impact on everyday life. For peasants and townsfolk, trade meant new job opportunities and access to goods previously unavailable. Craftsmen specialized in producing textiles, metalwork, and tools, while guilds formed to regulate quality and protect members' interests. At the same time, the influx of wealth sometimes increased social tensions, as the old noble class grappled with the growing influence of wealthy commoners. Trade's role in cultural exchange. Commerce also became a conduit for cultural and intellectual exchange. Ideas, technologies, and artistic styles traveled along with goods, bringing innovations like papermaking from Asia and new agricultural techniques. This exchange contributed to the gradual transformation of medieval European society, setting the stage for the Renaissance. Reflection on economic change. Trade and commerce were engines of transformation in the Middle Ages. They not only enhanced material wealth, but also began to erode old social orders and connect Europe to the wider world. Recognizing this helps us see the Middle Ages not as a static or backward period, but as a dynamic time of growth and change. The enduring legacy of the Middle Ages. Lessons for today. The Middle Ages were far more than just a distant, dusty chapter in history. They were a period of immense transformation, socially, politically, economically, and culturally, that set the foundation for much of the modern world we live in today. Reassessing the Dark Ages myth. Too often, the Middle Ages have been unfairly dismissed as a time of ignorance and stagnation, overshadowed by the achievements of the Renaissance and Enlightenment. But this overlooks the era's dynamic complexity and the resilience of its people. Throughout these centuries, society rebuilt from the ruins of Rome, creating new political structures, cultural identities, and economic systems. From a flowering of Gothic cathedrals to the growth of universities, the Middle Ages were a vibrant bridge between antiquity and modernity. Understanding the Middle Ages on its own terms allows us to appreciate how human societies evolve, often in fits and starts rather than steady progress. The role of conflict and cooperation. Medieval history is rife with conflicts, wars, invasions, feudal disputes, but it's equally a story of cooperation, whether through the Church's unifying influence, the rise of trade leagues, or legal reforms. People found ways to work together to build communities and institutions. This balance between conflict and cooperation is a timeless lesson about human nature and governance. The birth of modern concepts. Many ideas we take for granted originated or matured during the Middle Ages. Concept of justice and law, early parliamentary governance, economic innovation, and cultural synthesis. For example, Magna Carta planted seeds for constitutional law. Universities nurtured critical thinking, and commerce linked continents in new ways. A tale from the Middle Ages. Consider the story of Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women of her time. She navigated the complex political landscape of medieval Europe, influencing kingdoms and culture. Her life illustrates how individuals could shape history even within rigid societal constraints. Stories like Eleanor's remind us that history is shaped not just by broad forces, but by human courage, ambition, and ingenuity. The What the Middle Ages teach us today. In a world facing its own challenges, social upheaval, political division, and rapid technological change, the Middle Ages offer a mirror. They show us the importance of adaptation, the interplay between old traditions and new ideas, and the value of both conflict and collaboration in societal growth. The Middle Ages weren't a dark void, but a complex, vibrant epoch that laid the groundwork for many aspects of modern life. By revisiting this period with fresh eyes, we gain insights into how societies transform, the enduring power of human creativity, and the importance of understanding history as a continuum rather than isolated chapters. So next time you hear the Dark Ages, remember the rich tapestry beneath that label, and the lessons it holds for all of us navigating change today.